No welcome?
You're not.
Well, since we're insulting each other, I can't say I care much for your taste in clothes. Doesn't do a thing for you.
Your regeneration's not too attractive either. But at least I can change my appearance. You're stuck with what you've got. Leave the girl. It's the man I want.
That was a nice nap. Now, down to business. Just 3 small points. Where am I? Who am I? And who are you? The Rani! Stay back!
This is idiotic.
How about let battle begin? Our name is the Rani, although she's become a Rani, while I'm the Rani.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to a very special entry in the history of series, as we are discussing a character who has only returned recently after years of speculation. If you've read the title or even seen what's on screen, you know what I'm talking about. The Rani, one of the most wanted characters for a return despite only appearing in 2 rather mediocre stories. But that's the effect that Time Lords have, I suppose. Let's get right into it. By one account, the Rani only had one incarnation in her youth, which she maintained into the 7th Doctor's era through careful avoidance of regeneration. By other accounts, the incarnation of the 6th and 7th Doctor's eras had already regenerated once before. By another account, Ushas, the original name of the Rani, was one of the first members of the Dekka to become a junior Time Lord and gain the ability to regenerate. The Rani was the same age as the Doctor, indicating she was born in the same year as them. As a time tot, she played hide-and-seek with the young Doctor, leading to the 9th Doctor claiming that his skill at finding her drove her nuts. Some accounts did give the Rani's original name as Ushas, while another stated that the scrolls of Gallifrey gave her true name as simply Rani, unlike the Doctor and the Master, who had already acquired their nicknames at the Academy. She was an exceptionally successful and well-behaved student, in contrast to the Doctor, the Master, and another of their contemporaries, Drax. Like all Time Lords, Ushas was taken from her family at the age of 8 for the selection process in the Drylands. Staring into the untempered schism as part of a Time Lord initiation rite, Ushas was reported by one Time Lord historian to have been driven mad by what she saw. One account suggested that at the Academy, Ushas belonged to the Dekka, being their most intelligent member. She and her 9 friends from the Dekka were part of the Prydonian chapter, and so attended the Prydonian Academy. In another, which agreed that she was the most skilled student of her group, she belonged to the Partrex chapter. She was taught by Asmail, Sendok, Barusa, Frenilla, and Delox. At the Academy, she was a jack of all trades, but a master at chemistry, with neurochemistry being her speciality. Riversong suggested that the Doctor might have had a crush on the Rani at the Academy. Mortimus, another of the Dekka, once tried to ask Ushas out, but was so harshly rejected that he came to believe she wasn't interested in dating at all. As a result, he was, to Magnus's amusement, oblivious to the affair which later developed between Magnus and Ushas. Ushas was on an Academy research project when the Doctor was expelled from the Academy. The Doctor was invited to her 94th birthday party. The 7th Doctor and one of his future selves once reminisced about their graduation party, where the Rani was present with a giant mouse she'd created. On the day that the Doctor left Gallifrey, Ushas and the Master were desperate to know where he went. When retired CIA agent Maris was hired to find the Doctor, they used a chronal mind to kidnap her. They interrogated Maris on the whereabouts of the Doctor and were displeased when she told them that she didn't know. They were about to kill Maris when her employer extracted her from the area. She was exiled from Gallifrey when some of her lab mice grew to an enormous size. The mice ate Lord President Pandad IV's pet cat. They also bit the President himself, triggering a regeneration, and by one account also devouring Sokra, Pandad's Chancellor, and a CIA agent. By the scrolls of Gallifrey, this made her the last of the trio she'd formed with the Doctor and the Master at the Academy to turn renegade and leave Gallifrey. By another account, however, her exile actually occurred a short time before the Prydonian Academy Revolution, orchestrated by the Master, which formed the backdrop of the Doctor and Susan's escape from Gallifrey. Feeling that she would never be forgiven for the incident, Ushas opted out of Time Lord society, becoming a renegade. She took a TARDIS and settled on Miasimia Goria under the name of the Rani. One account suggested that she took the name Rani from a visit to India, where it meant reigning queen. By an account which raised the possibility the last great Time War began to be fought in the background of the Doctor's life after the Genesis incident, the Rani was not actually a renegade Time Lord, but actually a deep-cover High Council agent who was in exile as a cover for her off-world experiments. However, the Rani of the Sixth Doctor's era betrayed the High Council and attempted to go to Gallifrey in the past to speak with her younger self and convince her to take a different path in life, possibly undoing this version of history. Shortly after leaving Gallifrey, Ushas took over Miasimia Goria and took on the title of the Rani. She brought industry and the caste system to the planet and became its ruler, based in a palace decorated with statues of herself. While ruling the planet, she frequently conducted experiments in other parts of time and space. The Rani frequently travelled to Earth for centuries of her life without being noticed by other Time Lords. While the Rani certainly did not share the Doctor's fondness for Earth, which she considered to be a miserable planet, she was also disdainful of humans themselves and called them carnivores because they ate animals. At one point, the Rani created worm parasites, which allowed her to mind-control individuals. The Rani's notoriety made her the second most wanted criminal in the galaxy after the Master. She kept herself updated on the actions of other renegades, being aware of the Tremas Master's apparent death while facing the Fifth Doctor. At some point, she had visited Earth in the distant past, and acquired several Tyrannosaurus embryos. During her dinosaur experiments, she met a splinter faction of clockwork droids from the SS Marie Antoinette, and allied with them to create clockwork dinosaurs to survive the KT extinction event. Time travelers stopped this plan from succeeding. She began a great experiment to heighten the awareness of Miasimia Gorians and make them into geniuses. However, the process made them unable to sleep and caused mayhem, leading the Rani to leave the planet to find a solution. She visited Earth at various points in its history to extract chemicals from the brains of select human specimens. Because the chemicals in question enabled the human brain to sleep, and because the absence of these chemicals made her as violent and uncontrollable as those from her previous experiments, the Rani deliberately chose periods of social unrest to visit, using the violence to conceal her presence and its consequences. By the account in which the Rani was a High Council agent, the experiments with human sleep were actually research into how to weaponize humanity for when the last great Time War came to Earth. She visited the Trojan War, the Dark Ages, the American Revolution, and finally the Luddite riots in the village of Killingworth during the early 19th century, where she used the local bathhouse as her base, posing as the old woman in charge of the premises. Around this time, she travelled to Shildon, where she encountered Panda. The Tremas Master and, shortly after, the Sixth Doctor interrupted her work. The Doctor sabotaged the navigational system on her TARDIS, trapping the Master and the Rani inside as the time spillage caused the Tyrannosaurus embryos to grow at a dangerous rate. The Rani's TARDIS was sent to the outer reaches of the universe beyond the Milky Way. According to one account, this was the nearest she had ever gotten to regeneration. Various accounts existed of her actions after the encounter with the Sixth Doctor. By one account, the Rani continued to work with the Tremas Master, with the two of them having used their combined talents to survive the Tyrannosaurus embryos. Returning to Earth, the Rani created the Plague of Athens, which devastated the city during the Peloponnesian War, attempting to cause the Spartans to win so that she could use them as test subjects. However, the Master's attempt to lure the Sixth Doctor into a trap resulted in this scheme failing, with history not being changed. The duo went on to Terra Nova in 2046, the first major interstellar human colony planet. The Rani used her talents to alter the local flora and fauna to make it more deadly to humans. The Sixth Doctor interfered, causing the wildlife to grow beyond the Rani's control, necessitating withdrawal. The Rani and the Master then went on to the Middle East in the 7th century to replenish the Rani's parasites. After they were discovered by Leora, the Rani abandoned the Master and returned to her base on Miasimia Goria. By another account, the dinosaur grew to such a size that it broke its neck on the ceiling, but the Rani had been left adrift in her TARDIS when the Tree Master escaped from her by detaching the console room from the rest of her TARDIS. Shortly afterwards, from the Doctor's subjective point of view, she had in the meantime tried and failed to manipulate the political situation that existed between the three children of that reality's version of Cleopatra VII. However, she did manage to escape Terra Nova by using the entity to create a new TARDIS console room to replace the one the Master escaped in. By a third account, the Rani's next encounter with the Sixth Doctor and Peri was on Katuria, where she had been inspired by her experience with the Tyrannosaurus embryo to create new forms of dinosaur servants. There, she went by the name of Lamia. She was genetically modifying pterodactyls in order to take blood and tissue samples of Koturians for the purpose of learning about phasing. She believed that she could learn a way to control the outcome of regeneration by learning how the Koturians control their appearance when they phase. She immersed herself in their culture and became engaged to Jonas, an upper-class Koturian. However, their marriage ceremony was crashed by the Sixth Doctor and Perry Brown, the former of whom was invited as an old friend of Jonas's father, Ivris Makshi. Although they were too late to stop the physical ceremony, it failed to result in Jonas completing his phase, because both bride and groom have to be in love for the Emori stone to work, and the Rani was simply pretending. Although she claimed to be immune to emotion, the Doctor believed she felt some kind of attachment to her work, as she did beg him not to destroy her research by saying please. The Rani took over the planet Pyro Shika and enslaved the Shikari population using an army of cryogenics, as well as her parasites. Using the planet's unique substructure of latent power, she constructed the Time Destabilizer in order to revert 20th century Earth to the Cretaceous era. While on Pyro Shika, she experimented with various hybrids, including rat apes. The Sixth Doctor, Perry, and a human child came to the planet after the Rani froze the time of Earth and destroyed the Time Destabilizer, although the Rani managed to escape. By an account in which the Rani had been a High Council agent in the last Great Time War, she betrayed the High Council and instead allied herself with Davros. She attempted to get the Sixth Doctor to take her to Gallifrey in the past so as to convince her younger self to take a different path. Through this, she intended to deliver the Doctor to Davros. The Rani once established herself on Krontep and manipulated the life of Yrcanos, seemingly with the goal of helping him rescue Perry Brown from Kiv. The Rani once crashed into a branch of the Time Vortex, where all of time split into two wildly different paths. The Sixth Doctor found the Rani's TARDIS near the point of its destruction, and entered it to save history. The Sixth Doctor once encountered a mysterious plot by the Rani, in which she existed as three kind, honourable Rainier sisters in the early 20th century. With the Tetraps in her employ, led by Urak, the Rani invaded the planet of Lakertia and put into motion a complex plan to abduct 11 scientific geniuses from across time and space to harness the strange matter needed to make the planet into a time manipulator in order to correct what she considered to be errors in the universal timeline. A byproduct of this would be the deaths of the Tetraps and the Lakertians, which she considered a small price to pay. Finally, she decided to collect the Doctor and attacked his TARDIS with concentrated beams of radiation lethal to Time Lords, wounding him enough to trigger his regeneration into the seventh incarnation. Disguising herself as the Doctor's companion, Melanie Bush, she used amnesia drugs to convince the Doctor that her project was actually his, in order to better ensure his cooperation in completing her work. Once the Doctor had finished the calculation, the Rani confined him with the other geniuses and channeled their intellects into a giant artificial brain, which she believed could find the answer as to how to create a lightweight substitute for strange matter, since it was incredibly heavy and could only be destroyed by strange matter. When it was devised, she sent a missile containing the substance aimed at a strange matter asteroid. However, the Doctor, using his unstable mind as a virus, destroyed the brain and redirected the missile. Urak led the Tetraps against the Rani when he learned of her betrayal, and they placed her under house arrest in her TARDIS. Afterwards, the Doctor wrote in his diary about this event. When the Tetraps faced a food shortage crisis, Urak managed to have the Rani put on trial. When she was given the death sentence, Urak bargained with her to solve the food shortage, or her sentence would commence, giving her 2 humans and 2 alien prisoners as test subjects for her experiments that would solve the crisis. The Rani, however, teamed up with her 4 guinea pigs and managed to escape the planet. Each went their separate ways, with the Rani swearing to teach Urak a lesson and retrieve her timeship from him. Sometime later, she arrived on the planet DV Akrol 8. There, she rescued a young humanoid named Sirian from a group of Cybermen, and took him on as her travelling companion, though in effect he became her servant. During their travels, she taught him enough about the workings of the TARDIS for him to operate the console effectively. During their travels, she hatched a plan to harness the power of a time tunnel to gain control over galactic evolution. To do so, she collected a vast menagerie of all sentient life forms from across time and space, inside of her TARDIS. The last specimen she needed was a human, and since she knew the Doctor would stop her, she set out to incapacitate him in all of his incarnations. After capturing the first 2, she trapped the 7th and his predecessors within a time loop in Albert Square, taking Romana 2 as her last specimen. Since Romana was actually a time lady, the computer lacked a human specimen and instead had 2 time brains, creating an error which the Doctor would use to overload it, resulting in the Rani's TARDIS being sucked into the time tunnel. While one account simply waved off these events as a nightmare of the 7th Doctor, most insisted that they had indeed occurred. In an alternative timeline, the Rani cooperated alongside the Master, the Monk and Drax to try and destroy the world using a DNA recombiner, turning the human race into a Gestalt consciousness that could be used as a weapon to conquer the universe. Through unknown circumstances, the Rani later regenerated into her next incarnation, who was contemporary to the 7th Doctor. While she masqueraded as Professor Baxton at the College of Advanced Galactic Education, a foremost authority of moral philosophy, the Rani once again encountered the 6th Doctor and Peri, despite her expecting the 7th Doctor to show up. The Doctor questioned her about her theories in one of her lectures. She tested the students and used them to find suitability for experiments. Some of the students she experimented on were Lizzo and Reeve, and she attempted to experiment on Miklev, all experts in their fields. She was making a biodigital interface controller using a Seidelian brain scanner, which moved memories from one brain to another. Due to Miklev being concussed, Peri was instead drafted for experimentation. The real Professor Baxton was used as the overseer of the network of the students' brains, which she was using in order to calculate the minor events she would need in order to trigger a chain reaction to create the bigger events that she wanted, in effect reverse engineering chaos theory. The Doctor repeatedly annoyed her by calling her Ushas and reminiscing about the Decker, which allowed him to trick her to fall down through the floor on the way to her TARDIS, where she gloated about her part in the Doctor's next regeneration. She was sent to Tekarora Penitentiary, a prison for her misdemeanors. 97 years after her imprisonment, she became the governor of the prison. Using the prison as her base of operations, she used the prisoners to power a time corridor to Miasimia Goria. She took Constance Clark with her and was appalled at the state of the planet, but was delighted that Raj Kanu had become a success, the only one of her experiments to work as intended. She showed some emotion when she thought that Kanu was dead, but was put on trial by her subjects, where the Doctor said he would take her back to Gallifrey. She pleaded with Kanu to show some compassion in sentencing her, but instead tried to kill him. She escaped in a TARDIS survival pod that her previous incarnation had left there. Following the end of the last Great Time War, the 9th Doctor believed all Time Lords bar himself to be dead, and so did not expect to see the Rani again. Indeed, the Doctor would supposedly tell River Song that she was dead, with River saying as much while she, after helping the 11th Doctor fake his death, facetiously confused Missy for the Rani. However, she had in fact managed to survive the Time War and the Spy Master's raising of Gallifrey by sidestepping her genetic coding, eventually re-emerging under the alias of Mrs. Flood in the 15th Doctor's lifetime. As Flood, she settled on Earth, living down the road from both of the Doctor's future companions, Ruby Sunday and Belinda Chandra, showing a unique ability where she would make comments to an audience similar to the Doctor. Her plans were temporarily disrupted by the arrival of Sutekh, who unleashed a deadly dust cloud across time and space. After this was undone by the Doctor and Ruby, she put her plans into action around the date of May 24th, 2025. She began following the Doctor and Belinda through time as he calibrated a Vindicator, where she posed in various positions such as a cinema goer and a Lombardic squadron leader, eventually making more direct contact with Belinda on the planet Suze. This culminated with her attending the 803rd Interstellar Song Contest, where the Doctor obtained his final Vindicator reading to reach May 24th. Mrs. Flood decided to stay and watch the show, which proved to be fatal as she, along with the 100,000 other attendees, was sucked out into space. As she was the last one to be reanimated from being frozen in space, her brain stems had been left inactive for too long, effectively killing her current body. This triggered a regeneration that interestingly caused her to bigenerate, with her sterner next incarnation emerging from her. Dismissing her predecessor as now simply being a Rani, the new Rani took charge and immediately moved to bring the Doctor absolute terror, with Mrs. Flood in tow as a subordinate. When Conrad Clark was imprisoned, Mrs. Flood came to his aid as a prison governor, giving him the keys to his cell as he would be important to their plans. When Mrs. Flood released Conrad, the new Rani travelled to Bavaria in 1865 to collect the newborn son of Otto Zufall, the 7th son of a 7th son, who was the reincarnation of Desiderium, the god of wishes. She used his power to create a fragile world based on the wishes of Conrad Clark. Through this she had a bone palace high in the sky of her wish world, through which she monitored and controlled it. She was relying on the 15th Doctor to start doubting the wish world, as she knew a Time Lord's doubt was more powerful than human doubt. she eventually got him to realise the truth, which caused the reality she had created to collapse, opening the Underverse hoping to find Omega. With Omega as a genetic databank, she could recreate a new Gallifrey in her image, but this plan was unsuccessful, as when Omega emerged from his tomb as a skeletal shadow of his former self, the personification of his legend making him a mad tyrant, he devoured the Rani in front of the Doctor and Mrs. Flood. Preferring to escape rather than join her successor, Mrs. Flood picked up the Rani's time ring and escaped as the now singular Rani. And that is the story of the Rani, one that for years has been suspected to be expanded upon, and only recently did that come true. Did she really have a love life with the Doctor? Well, it is true she never really intended to kill him. In their first televised encounter, she doesn't even care that he was there, but then we do get to Dimensions in Time, where it seems that she's more concerned with getting rid of him. But anyway guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then consider leaving a like and subscribe down below, as it really helps out the channel. I've got another video coming out this week on Omega, now that we know how his story ends, so stay tuned for that. But as always, thanks for watching.